Hello again. So, following off from the last video with the new gen Scania, we got the chassis done. Part 1 is about parts 1 to 8 or something in the manual. So, to me it was only a few minutes ago, but in this one, there's the shocks. So I have a couple of shocks to show you, a front and a rear. There's a bump stop. It's literally just a bit of glue and a screw, but I'll still show you that anyway. And then we're on to hanging the leaf springs, front and rear, and getting them ready for the axles. Well, especially the rear. We can do the front axle, but obviously the rear axle, they have the gears and diffs and stuff like that in there. So we'll do that one in the next video, and then I presume it'll be onto the gearbox, and then just finishing off bits and bobs on the chassis, like the wheels, putting on the fifth wheel, the fifth wheel cover, whatever other little bits there might be, and other bits to go on the side of the chassis. Could get them done in 1 or 2 videos, and then it's on to the cab. So the shock absorbers, parts 8. Now it's in 2 sections. You do have the front axle, bolting that up to the U-bolts, and the leaf springs ready to be mounted to the brackets that we've already put on the chassis, and the shocks, which I'm going to go through with you now, and the bump stops, and then we can keep progressing to the rear, which is part 11. And then, as I said, the next will be the axles, so that'll be like parts 12, 13 and 14. Is there another part for that? So that's going to take us up to part 17 in the next one. So 12 to 17, and this one is 8 to 12. So the shock absorbers, that's what's remaining. I don't know which is which with these. That's a rear, it's unsprung. That one's also a rear, and that one's a rear, and that one's sprung. It's pushing itself back out. They are useless, but so first of all, I'm going to put a little O-ring on the end of there. It does say to lube these up. Now you can go ahead and put a bit of grease around there. So pop your thingamadoofer, your little O-ring on the end of your shock pin. I'll remove the cap off one. We'll do the front first, and it's going to push that into the hole there. And then you want a Phillips in there. Remember to do this first, to put your little like ball joint thing, whatever, on the bottom of the shock there. Just keeping the screwdriver just to keep it locked into place, and then you can just wind that on until it winds no more. Now, as this is a front shock, the fronts need the spring. Just drop the spring in there, pop the cap back on, and that is a front shock. And the rears are exactly the same, minus the spring. So you want to pop your O-ring on there, and push your shock rod through. Remember to keep hold of it, and screw on a little bracket for the bottom of your shocks there. Pop the cap back in. and that's a rear. So dead easy for that. Now the bump stop, just want to grab a little drop of modelling cement or some super glue, something along them lines. All you want to do is just put a little drop on the end of your bump stop there, and then your bump stop is going to just stick in there. So I'm going to leave that for a few minutes just to dry, and then we can put that on the bottom of the chassis with the rest of them. Now I think I mentioned in the last video with the bump stops, as you can see there is like a little lip that comes down. That wants to be toward the inside of the rail, and the actual rubber stop wants to be to the outsides, like so. And if you get the lip on the inside, the rubber to the outside, then you've got it correct. So now for a little 6mm 3x6 screw just to hold that in place. And I'm not thread locking these into place either, because these will want to come off also to be painted, just to colour coordinate a bit more. Don't want to leave them as white underneath. They do look a little bit lost. But for the purpose of the build, we'll just leave them as is for now. So that's the bump stops and the shocks done. Now onto the first part of 8, and you're going to want the actual axle, leaf springs, U-bolts, the plates and the little shock mounts, which are going to bolt up to the front of the axle. And for this I am going to be using thread lock. One axle, everything's all here. You want to take your front axle, and the manual would show it upside down and this way around to me. And now what you want to do is take the leaf springs, which we have here, and the back of the leaf spring, you'll see like a ball, and that will actually just rest within there, and then we're just going to clamp them into place. So now with the U-bolts over like so, and one of these plates on the bottom, same on the other side. Now using the little spanner provided in your kit, and just go ahead now and tighten all those up. Don't want them over tight where your plate's bending, but tight enough where the springs are locked in place. There is no back or front to the springs, so it doesn't matter which way they go in. And once you're comfortable with that side, you're basically going to repeat the exact same process on this side. So I'll go ahead now and get that bit done. Now using the thread lock provided and taking the front axle and one of these brackets is going to hold your shocks into place. You'll find a threaded hole within the axle, and these are just going to bolt up into there. Repeat on the other side. And that's almost a complete front axle with your brackets. So now what we want to do is we want to hang this onto the front of the chassis. Like so. So for this we're going to be using the 3x14 step screws and some locking nuts. And all we're going to do now, just land the springs into the holes, drop a step screw in there, put a locking nut on the back, again using your little Tamiya spanner, and then you just want to repeat that on that side and within the rear two hangers at the rear there. So I'll get that bolted up and voila. So now to add the shock absorbers from this bracket to the top of the shock stay here, and for that we're going to be using the set screws and the locking nuts on the bottom, and to the top we're going to be using a flange nut and a screw. So you may want to separate your shocks when you've built them, then you know the difference between your front and your rears. So yeah, that's a rear, that's a rear. See, a front won't fully compress either, so that's a giveaway. So for the front, we're just going to drop that into there. Step screw through there. And lock the rear of that with a nut. Again, repeat that on this side. So next we want to fix the top of the shocks to the damper stays now, the shock stays, and take in one of these shock collars. I want to just pop that into the back there. Should really have bolted these in the other way around from the top to the bottom, but never mind. It's just a little bit fiddly. But yeah, make sure your collars press in from the back, because the bigger part is going to act like a bushing kind of a washer, just to keep your shock out straight. And I think we've got these, I believe, the 15 mils. Yep, 3x15s. And they're just going to go through there and lock them in with one of these flange nuts. Same on the other side. so. Screw. Flange nut. And just tighten that up. So that is step 9 now out of the way. Steps 8 and 9. But you can see the suspension's pretty useless, to be honest with you. But at least there's some give there. So there we go, step 9. And now step 10, we are going to be attaching the steering knuckles to the front axle. So we shall get them two done and then wrap that up for that video, and then we're on to building up the diff gears and putting the axle casings on, little bits like that. So what you are going to need are these, and these are parts E8 and E9, and you've got a left and a right. Now you want them to be with those to the outside, because they're going to go in there later on, and that's where your wheel will clamp up to. So you want to make sure they are the right way around. So it's a hollow bit to the outside with your hex nut point on the top to the front. So then once they're in the axles, they would be facing that way. So for this, all we're doing at the moment is we have these 3 ball joints, and all we're going to do is the RO cut out hex wise within there. So you just want to drop your nut into there. This is the left, by the way. The left will only have one of these, and the right is going to have 2. And then basically one of those is for your steering bar, which will operate both knuckles, and one of those will come from the servo. So then your compression from the servo will force the rear of that out, making that steer, or your servo will go that way, pulling it in, making it steer that way. But we'll have a closer look at that once we get more set up with the truck. So little nuts inside there, and just screw those into there. And to tighten these up, you should also have in your little Tamiya kit thing, tool bag, you will have some of these key things. Now they just go over the ball joint there, so you can tighten that up on that nut point there. But they are designed to just clear the ball. So the next 2, it's all self-explanatory. You're just putting the nuts in the holes and screwing them in. So the left has the 2. But I might need to change that later on down the line, as I am front mounting my servo and not having a shift servo. But as the manual states, that's how you would do that. So for this part, you want to take your little shaft where the wheel bolts on, and they're just going to slot into the side there. So you're going to attach this now into the little C piece on the axle, and underneath here there will be a hole. There we go. and then your little E-clip. Now, I really should invest in an E-clip tool, only a few quid. Well, there we go. Put that into there. And the next E-clip. There we go. So now we almost have steering. Left, right, left, right. So that's step 10 done for me. As I said, some of yous will be running with the standard side mounted servo linkage setup for the steering. So just ignore that part or pretend it's there. So now on to part 11. We're going to get the rear leaf springs hung, and these clamp up slightly different to the front because the free hanging springs, which are going to be then bolted to the axles, whereas the leaves on these actually do clamp up to the axle. You will be wanting parts F2 and F8 from your parts tree, and that is those. Leaf springs, they are the same as the fronts, so if you do muddle them up, don't worry, there is no front or rear. Bits of hardware that's requested, and we're going to need the U-bolts, the plates and the hangers. Right, this is going to be the top, and your U-bolts will end up clamping over there like so. So next you want your leaf spring kind of upside down. Again, as with the axle, you'll find a ball grooved out in there. That's just going to sit up in there like so. And then you have another piece, it's more of a flat piece with a hole, and the grooves on the side which will sit between the U-bolt. Make sure to have the hole at the top there, because that's going to sit in place of the leaf spring, the little point on there. Your other U-bolt if you wish. I usually like to do one at a time, but then put the plate over like so. And as we did with the front, using these little lock nuts, it's going to clamp it all into place. Tamiya key. I'll just hold them 2 U-bolts in, and now I can add the others. So now you should have a leaf that looks like so. I'm just going to repeat that for this one. Now we have 2 rear leaf springs. So before we attach these, you've got these 4 triangular little brackets. Now basically the backs of those are threaded, and later down the line when we come to bolt the axles up, the screws will lock them from another plate under the axle, so it'll come through and clamp that down. With it being threaded, that is like the clamp. So what we're going to do is, using those step screws again, is attach those to either side of the leaf. Now there is no left and right setup with these, so now again the little locking nuts, the step screw through there, the locking nut, Lock that up. Same on the other side. So there we have one done, and repeat for the other one. Voila! So with the screw heads to the outside and the nuts to the inside, we have a left and a right. That's my left and right. So once those are sat in place on the suspension, like so, everything's all flowing with the nuts to the inside. So now, to mount these onto the little suspension plates there, and for this you need these two 13mm round bushings, you need the 100mm screw. All these are found in the suspension parts bag, and we need another lock nut to lock that on there. Remember the outside, a bushing in there and a bushing in the other. And this is going to go straight through the centre hole on your suspension plate. It's going to come through holes within your cross member, your rear mount part there. It's going to come in between that and out the other hole on the other side. This is the same, it's just set up a little bit different, but then that'll go straight through and out. So it is the same. You want to put your screw into there, and then we're going to feed that right the way through out the other end, and taking your other leaf that you've just made up, just going to sit that onto there, and taking the little lock nut and then tighten that up. And hey presto. Now I'm unsure if I'm going to be painting this chassis for her or just leaving it as is. Being a first truck, don't want to go too overboard with it. But there are a few little bits that I am going to have to take off and paint up. But if I am planning on painting it, now is a good time to really think about doing that. If you're planning on doing one of these yourself, you don't really want too much more in the way. The axle housings and the gearbox housings you would paint separate, but the chassis I would remove the servo, but the rest I would paint up as it is now, like that. Now I use an etching primer by Autotech. Now etching primers, a lot of them are very like acidic, but not acid. There's something in there and it will eat plastics. However, I use an Autotech etch primer. It'll probably be with all the paints at the moment, but I will show you that should I come to paint this chassis. But you would need to proper scrub it all, clean it, degrease it. Wouldn't worry about getting it wet. Have an air dryer on hand. And then you're going to want to lightly scuff up all your chassis. Just go over everywhere, scuffing everything up. Just taking that sheen out of it all. And then, like I say, I've used the Autotech etching primer, and I have never ever had an issue on chassis with the plastics or anything like that. But that would be on your own head. Be it, should you choose to do that and something goes wrong, I am not responsible. It works for me, doesn't mean it's going to work for you, but I'm confident. I've used it on a number of trucks and chassis. So yeah, if you're looking at painting your truck and you're at this stage, now would be a good time to start considering that. But there it is. We're almost at a roller now. So that's 10 and 11 out of the way. I'll continue now doing the next video, getting these done up. 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and fitting them. 17. Now it's been quite a while since I've built a 6x4 chassis. I'd have to have a quick Google search just for the dimensions of the original 6x4, because to me this seems, and even when you look at the pictures, I don't know if it's the angle of the image, but a lot of these 6x4 heavy haulers with the double drive outputs like this are usually on a long chassis, and that's usually a problem with a lot of the 6x4s with the Tamiya, and a lot of people will take a chunk out to make them more scale and bring them dual wheels closer up to the cab a bit. I don't know if it's because I've just been building so many longer trucks recently that they look out of proportion. Well, not out of proportion, but more, like I say, I'd have to look at the measurements on that just to see if they are actually shorter. But yeah. Anyway, enough waffling. This video's probably gone on a bit, so I'll be back in the next one with the diffs and the axles, the rear ones, and getting them on there, and then we can move on to that gearbox. So thanks again for tuning in, guys. Hope you've enjoyed the video, and I hope you can take something away from it and it helps some of you who's never built before, and if you're just here for the pleasure of watching people build, and I thank you also. So don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, ping the notification bell, and I shall catch you all in the next one. Ciao for now, guys.